Good morning. It is the 10th of September. It is Wednesday, all day. You join myself and Mr. Michael Brown for the Morning Blast, where we will be giving you a review of yesterday, a preview of today, news, market action, etc., etc. Before I do, I'll crack on with the legals. Nothing discussed in this space this session constitute trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed Mr. Michael Brown, who claims he's in the office.
Very good morning, Sharon. Good morning, everyone. I am in the office this morning. Two
Yeah.
other people have turned up to join me, so it's getting nice and busy in here now. And because I'm in the office, I can give you an update on the tube strikes, because, of course, we mentioned on the blast earlier in the week that, if people are going to go on strike, then they should do it properly and join a picket line and all the rest of it. Would you like to know how many people were on the picket line at London Bridge
Yes.
Station
Well,
this
no.
morning?
I'll tell you what. Let's start with this. Need to come up with a catchy theme tune. Du-du-du-du-du-du. Let's play picket number. Let's play picket line overs unders. I'm gonna say what tube station was this? Sorry.
London Bridge.
Right. So quite a major hub.
Yeah.
I'm going to say my market is 6.
Oh, I'm afraid you're wrong. There were four of them.
Oh fuck! I gave him too much. 4 people on the picket line. Is that like
Ah,
if we do make one rule to changes to Labour union rules, it should be anyone that votes to go on strike should be forced to be on the picket for the duration of their scheduled shift. Like,
yeah.
I don't mind picket lines like, back in the good old days when the miners were striking. Good old days being an operative word, depends on who you are. But yeah, this is just ridiculous. They're all down the pub. They're all in Portugal. Probably, Benidorm or wherever the tube drivers drink and sleep and holiday. Fuck knows. It's an absolute, it's ridiculous, my friend. It's absolutely
Ryan Paisley
ridiculous.
there leaning into every stereotype imaginable about your typical tube driver.
Do you know what? I've been told I need to bring back Ryan Rant, so maybe tube strikes are going to be the first one I
Oh
discuss.
dear.
Fuck
Right.
markets.
Well, while you go and make your notes for that, I'll tell
Go
everyone
on,
what's going on in markets.
please.
It was a kind of a case of more of the same, at least in terms of the equity space yesterday. The S&P and the Nasdaq both rallying by about 0.3%. Although we did see the recent move in the Treasury complex reverse course, with losses seen across what was a flatter yield curve, with those losses led by the front end as the 2-year yield rose by about 5 basis points on the day, back to 3.55%. And we also saw the 30-year yield poke its way above 4.7% once more. The dollar trading broadly firmer against most peers, while gold traded to new all-time highs on an intraday basis at $3,670 an ounce before pairing that move into the close and continuing to pair some of those gains overnight. In terms of fundamental catalysts, actually quite a lot to get through this morning. We may as
Yeah.
well start with the data because, of course, all eyes yesterday were on the preliminary benchmark revisions to the non-farm payrolls number. This, of course, applies to the March. What are you chuckling about?
Because you're about to talk about a huge revision to NFP. Why wouldn't I be
Well,
chuckling?
I am, but I'm going to tell you that the preliminary benchmark revision pointed to the total employment level as of March 2025 being 911,000 lower than had previously been
Oof.
expected. This is, just to get it out of the way, well above consensus, which had been around 700,000. It's also the largest downward revision on record and comes after the 590 odd thousand revision to the downside that we saw last year. I would just caveat this with two things, though. Firstly, it's not actually that surprising that it's the biggest revision on record because the labour force is as big as it's ever been on record. So you kind of expect that. The other thing I would say is that this doesn't actually tell us anything. Our good friend Dario Perkins, when he's not busy with his gold BMW, was putting out some nuggets of information on Twitter yesterday and asked a very good question. All we know now is that 6 months ago, the total level of employment in the US was lower than we thought. What are you going to do with that information? How are you going to trade that number?
Right.
Frankly, you're not.
Firstly, hello Dario, because he usually does listen in, but it's anonymously, as I know. So hi, you gold BMW driving
He's
tart.
doing his jigsaw at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not about trading it. It's not about trading the number for me. It's just another sign that the BLS is just BS. Yeah, and this is why we should stick to solid private company or public company figures such as ADP. because
Well,
you don't get revisions to the tune of 1 million. And also to say, oh, it was expected to be 900,000 because it's the biggest labor force ever. I'm sorry, my dear friend, but bollocks. Because
well,
if it was 500 last time, right? The labour force hasn't grown by 90% since then, which would equate to about the same revision, right? They're out by 1 million people, right? It just shows you how bollocks the NFP number is. But yeah, are we going to trade on the back of this? No, not really. But should it be seen from the Fed and central banks across the world, really, because it's all coming to the fore that basically all kind of government data is bollocks. That if the Fed are relying on this number, maybe they shouldn't so much. Maybe they should take other metrics of employment, such as ADP, because if you're basing, you know, significant decisions on what it's not even a question anymore. BLS data is BS, and it's going to have huge revisions. But yet you're quite happy to take that and put that into your mental model to decide what you're going to vote for when it comes to the next rate decision. It's all bollocks. Anyway, that's my new rant.
have you come down off your little Shetland pony now?
Yes, thank you very
Because
much.
if you'd read my note this morning or my comment in the aftermath of the data yesterday, you would know that I said the only real takeaway from that data is that the BLS need to pull their finger out and get on with revising their data collection methods. I would also say that the reason you don't see millions revised off the ADP number is because they don't actually bother to revise the data. But we can
Because
skirt round that because otherwise you're going to get all aerated again.
why revise perfection?
Oh, Christ almighty. Right, moving on from that, where should we go next? Let's talk about trade very briefly. Reports in the FT overnight saying that President Trump has asked the EU to impose tariffs of up to 100% on both China and India in order to try and exert pressure on Russian President Putin. Frankly, there is more chance of the non-farm payrolls numbers being spot on next month than there is of this actually happening. But nevertheless, Trump is running around with it regardless. Also on the trade front, we heard from India yesterday, their foreign minister, saying that trade negotiations with the US can still proceed, despite the fact that India is currently subject to 50% tariffs. Of course, 25% of that is as a result of their closeness to Russia. Moving on from that into the geopolitical arena, I'm sure Ryan will cover this in a bit more detail momentarily, but two events worth noting on this front. Firstly, yesterday, Israel launching a series of missile attacks on Doha in Qatar. Before anyone thinks why are Israel attacking the Qataris, they're not. They were attacking Hamas leadership who have been hiding out / being harboured in Doha, delete as appropriate. They were reportedly targeting a Hamas negotiating delegation in Doha, and apparently President Trump, depending on which report you read, he
Well, yeah,
either
quite.
was informed of what was going on or gave a green light as to what was going on.
Well, no. Also, a third option, didn't know until afterwards. Well, that one came out when people. That one only came out when the reaction to him knowing and greenlighting it beforehand was negative. He then turned and go, actually, I didn't really know it was going on. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
fine.
the story is changing quite a lot on that front. In any case, according to Al Jazeera, so get a pinch of salt ready, the Hamas leadership who were targeted in that attack have apparently survived. So not entirely sure whether it was successful or not. Of course, all the usual reaction, a lot of the Arab states coming out and condemning this. Is it going to lead to a massive escalation in
No,
tensions in the Middle East? Absolutely not. This sort of
no.
shit never does. Let's be completely honest with you.
Just quickly on this because we might as well cover it now. You're covering it. Again, we won't find out for probably a couple of weeks and exactly what was the chain of events here and who knew what. And the user journey, to coin a phrase. But to me, reading kind of the bits I have read, it seems very, very bizarre that Qatar's air defense or whatever, all this stuff didn't pick up anything, which, considering the ties that they have to the US, makes me think that maybe, potentially, we'll find out, usually in a Wall Street Journal piece.
Do you think they might have just turned it off?
I think they might have been looking the other way or maybe tying their shoelaces when the radar screen was blipping. But
Yeah.
we'll see. But we'll see. But we are not experts, and we're not going to claim to be experts, unlike most of the people on FinTwit. And also, oil is not going to $100 a barrel on the back of it.
No, absolutely not. Oil did rally about 50 cents a barrel, I
50
should say.
bucks. Fucking hell.
Sorry, not all of us used to trade oil, mate. It rallied about 50 cents on the headlines, but paired that within about 3 hours or so, which kind of tells you everything you need to know. The other bit of geopolitical news that is doing the rounds this morning, and again, all of the usual folk are getting their tin hats on and getting all very excited about this. Russia launched another missile and drone attack on Ukraine overnight, which they've obviously been doing for some time. A number of those drones, though, I say strayed into, they ended up in Polish airspace. A lot of geopolitical commentators saying that one drone ending up in the
Yeah,
airspace would have been a mistake. Several of them seemed deliberate and a bit of a test to see how
well,
NATO would respond to this
twice,
sort of thing.
because if it
Um,
was a mistake, then that just seemed very indicative of how shambolic the
well,
Russians are.
yeah, quite.
Otherwise, and like, yeah, I want to give them a bit of credit, but surely they're not that. I'm trying to use a nice word, but I can't. Yeah, surely they're not that shambolic. But yeah, it's an interesting one to keep an eye on. Definitely, it's one of those that it's not a big deal until it really is. Yeah, there's been a
Yes.
lot. There's been a lot of commentary, especially from the Poles themselves, Polish government. Obviously, they're up in arms. Donald Tusk himself called it a large-scale provocation, but says the situation is under control. Poland signalled it's ready to respond to any future attacks or provocations, and this represents a significant escalation in the conflict spillover effects. But again, it's not. This is not the end of the world. This is not NATO getting into the fight. There's still a lot of steps and a lot of things have got to happen before that is even on the cards.
Yep, we're going to have Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, write a very strongly worded statement to anyone who'll listen, and then the whole thing will be forgotten about as quickly as it happened.
Exactly that.
That
Exactly that.
often seems to be the way.
Yeah.
Anyway, away from geopolitical developments, let's run through a few other bits and bobs. Over in the United States, there was a court ruling overnight in the case regarding Fed Governor Lisa Cook. Of course, Trump is trying to fire her over allegations of mortgage fraud. The court ruling that Trump is not able to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook for the time being. And this judge also saying that Trump likely does not have cause to fire Cook from her role. Of course, the Trump administration are almost certain to appeal this ruling, and the appeals will go on and probably all the way up to the Supreme Court. But the fact that this ruling has been made means that as things stand right now, Fed Governor Lisa Cook remains in post. It also means that she will be attending and voting at the FOMC meeting, which takes place next Tuesday and Wednesday. Although, of course, a higher court could make a contrary ruling in the meantime. But for the time being, it seems like Lisa Cook is staying put. On which note, we heard from a Democrat representative yesterday, a chap called Raskin. He has decided to launch a long overdue investigation into Federal Housing Director Bill Pulte, alleging that he is using the Federal Housing Agency to target foes and enemies of President Trump. He has requested various documents relating to the mortgage investigations that Pulte has been conducting. Of course, for those who are unaware, Pulte has gone after not only Lisa Cook, but Adam Schiff and a whole host of other people that basically Trump doesn't like very much, and seems to be ignoring the fact that identical allegations have been made about three members of President Trump's cabinet, which
Also
seems
his
rather
mum and dad.
convenient, to say the least, and his mum, his stepmother, I think, and his
Sorry,
father.
sorry, sorry, sorry.
To be completely honest, it's really not this bloke's week, is it? I mean, he's got
No,
Scott
off him
Bessent
up.
threatening to beat him up. He's now got the House investigating what he's up to. And frankly, it's long overdue because the bloke is just an all-round general
Um,
annoyance and
so,
pain in the arse.
didn't you tell me, or say it on the show last week, that he's actually been kicked out of the family's charitable trust?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, he has. He's been disowned.
Nice bloke.
Which kind of says everything you need to know, doesn't it?
Oh,
Uh,
very much so.
Sticking with the Fed, just lastly, we also heard via the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, of course, Steve Moran, who is currently the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. There is due to be a vote on the Senate Banking Committee today regarding advancing Moran's nomination to the full Senate floor. That Senate floor vote will then probably take place, you would expect, this week, because, of course, the Trump administration want Moran to be at the Fed for the time of that September meeting. Moran was responding to some written questions that have been asked by Senator Elizabeth Warren, who is the ranking member on the Senate Banking Committee. And in answers to these questions, he refused to commit to stepping down from the Fed at the end of January, which is when the term he's being appointed to is due to expire. He also refused to commit to resigning from the White House if his tenure at the Fed extends past January. Now, for those who haven't been following this one especially closely, what usually happens when you're appointed to the Fed board is you either resign from your previous job, if it's in the private sector, for example, or if you're previously an academic, like, for example, Lisa Cook or Governor Kugler was, you take just an unpaid leave of absence from your academic post. What Steve Moran is proposing to do is take an unpaid leave of absence from his post, but that post is as chair of President Trump's economic advisory team, which, to say it blurs the lines around
Yeah,
monetary
right.
policy independence, is probably an understatement. So that one's gone a little bit under the radar, but I think it probably deserves a little bit more attention than it has been getting. Anyway, moving on from that, other bits and bobs from yesterday, we had some BOJ sources via Bloomberg, pretty much in keeping with the Reuters reporting around the fact that the BOJ still see the chance of a rate hike this year, despite political developments, even if they are likely to keep rates unchanged at their next meeting on the 19th of September. Here in the UK, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, was talking in the
Oh,
Commons yesterday. She was saying that it is, quote, not serious to suggest that the UK might need a bailout from the IMF. Well,
oh
not
God.
yet,
Oh
anyway,
God.
but thanks for tempting fate on that one, Rach. Also on the UK, we had reports in the FT last night that apparently Keir Starmer has created a budget board of so-called
Christ.
experts to manage the
Oh, I would
budget
love to see this.
process.
Do we know who's on this brains trust?
Well, I can tell you who's chairing the Brains Trust,
Oh
Ryan, because
no.
there are two co-chairs. The
Go on.
first is Baroness Minouche Shafik, who has been wrong about absolutely everything
Oh
she's ever
God.
said. And she will jointly chair that group with junior Treasury Minister and MP for Swansea, Torsten
No.
Bell.
No. No.
Yes,
Oh
yes,
no.
yes.
Sorry guys, one sec. I'm just going to check my passport's still in date.
Oh God! Honestly, I mean, if
Oh,
that doesn't send shivers down your spine, I don't know what will.
we're
For
doomed.
We really are. For those who are unaware or not based in the UK, Shafik is just an idiot, and Torsten Bell is an absolute tax fanatic. I mean, he'd tax the air you're breathing if he could. He just seems to
Torsten
get
Bell
very
is the kind
excited
of
about it.
person. Torsten Bell is the kind of person that would subscribe to some Bird's OnlyFans if she read out like taxation manifestos. Um, Picture him in the corner with his baby lotion. Oh,
Oh no,
oh
that's a
God.
horrible image. Oh
Yeah.
God!
Sorry
Right.
everyone. Sorry.
Very quickly moving on from that,
Yeah.
French President Macron, he appointed a chap called Sébastien Lecornu as his new prime minister. This bloke is a close ally of Macron and was previously armed forces minister. I mean, great, they're not going to have elections, but it really doesn't change anything in the grand scheme of things,
No.
to be completely honest with you. And actually, France is today facing a, quote, day of gridlock amid a grassroots movement to block everything across the country as part of a nationwide strike against proposed austerity plans.
See
So,
the
great
French.
first day for the job for the geezer.
See the RMT. If you're going to strike, tell them to take a leaf out the French because the French strike very well. They protest very well.
Yeah, go and burn some tyres or something. Like, don't just
Right,
stand
get the
around
muck
outside
spreader
London
out
Bridge
and
having a
get
coffee.
get the muck spreader out and put a load of cow shit up the city hall or something like that.
Oh dear. Lastly, a few bits of corporate news from me. Politico reporting yesterday that Tesla are looking to test their new ride-hailing service in the Bay Area in the United States. Of course, of note for people like Uber and Lyft. Here in Europe, the EU Commission, they have cleared the takeover of Deliveroo by DoorDash. That was announced some time ago. Of course, does mean that Deliveroo will be leaving the London market. Apple, they announced a whole host of new products yesterday. The AirPods Pro 3, which are going to translate things live as you hear them. The Watch Series 11, which apparently has a more durable design. And a whole host of new iPhones as well, where I think the two main takeaways are, one, that the iPhone Air will be the thinnest model to date. So that's guaranteed to break in your back pocket at
Yeah,
some
do you know what?
point.
I said that to someone else last night. Exactly that.
And secondly, the iPhone 17 Pro, which now comes in orange. So if you're Dutch, then your luck is in, I guess. And
Or if you're a fan
last,
of Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, or Christine Lagarde, actually, for that
Well, there
matter.
you go.
Uh, Lastly, but by no means least from me this morning, according to the information, Microsoft are going to be buying AI from Anthropic in a shift from open AI. To be honest, I haven't read the story, but it does seem a little bit odd given that Microsoft are basically owning open AI at this point, that they would go and buy tech from one of their competitors. But there we are, one for the AI people just to get excited about, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mr. Michael Brown. So before I hand back to you, I'll read out some of the selected headlines from the overnight news roundup. As always, do follow our dear friend Zach Eisman on Twitter for this. Also, do follow the Substack. Also, do follow at PIQ Newswire, because that's where the fire hose of news is currently going down, as we try and make the account slightly more manageable. We've covered Poland. Just one thing to really ram home is that NATO have specifically said that they're not treating this as an attack on the alliance. So anyone you see saying anything to the contrary, tell them to give their head a wobble. Geopolitical news, moving on from Poland. President Trump said he's very unhappy about every aspect of Israeli strike on Qatar soil and promised a full statement today. This adds another layer of complexity to the Middle East tensions that could impact energy markets, potentially. Belgium, they're exploring riskier methods to maximise profits from 190 billion euros worth of frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine, provided the EU shares legal risks. This could set an important precedent on how Western nations handle seized Russian assets, so one to watch there. Macro news, Trump urged EU officials on Tuesday to hit China with tariffs up to 100% as part of a strategy to pressure Putin. That's according to Reuters sources. He's also pushing for similar tariffs on India. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court agreed to decide the legality of Trump's global tariffs on a fast track with arguments scheduled for early November. Sticking with the US, a federal judge blocked Trump from removing Fed Governor Lisa Cook with while the lawsuit to challenge her firing proceeds. This creates, obviously, as Michael said before, it creates a lot of uncertainty with Fed leadership during a critical policy period. Fitch, they've upgraded its 2025 world growth outlook despite US economic concerns, saying China and Europe look better than previously thought. However, US holiday sales are projected to grow at the slowest pace since the pandemic. That's according to Deloitte. Moving over to China. China's deflationary pressures continued in August, with consumer prices slipping back into contraction, though core CPI rose for a fourth straight month. Producer deflation eased slightly, suggesting Beijing's efforts to reduce excessive competition may be working. Sticking over in that way, but moving over the Sea of Japan to Japan. In Japan, manufacturers' sentiment hit its best level in over 3 years in September, helped by reduced trade uncertainties after the July tariff deal. Hedge funds are adding bullish yen bets after the BOJ official signalled openness to rate hikes despite political instability. Equities, just a few headlines here before I hand back to my dear friend Michael. Oracle shares exploded 31% in after-hours trading after delivering an aggressive cloud business outlook. I would love to see what an aggressive cloud looks like.
Well, what it looks like is almost their forecast is basically for exponential revenue growth over the next 5 years, which I'm no expert, but I'm pretty sure won't happen.
Well, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. TSMC, they reported 34% revenue growth in August, well above the 25% that analysts were expecting. Again, they're signaling a sustained AI chip demand. The company has been forced to cut advanced packaging production time from 7 quarters to just 3 to meet customer urgency. Morgan Stanley, however, they've cut Nvidia's GB200/300 shipment forecast for 2025 from 34,000 units down to 27,600, saying that they initially overestimated the ramp-up speed. Synopsys, they plunged 20% after hours, warning the US export restrictions are contributing to a slowdown in China, the world's largest semiconductor market. GameStop, can't stop GameStop, jumped 7% after hours. What is this, a jump for ants? On stronger than expected Q2 profits driven by collectibles and hardware sales. In pharma news, Johnson & Johnson, they got FDA approval for a bladder cancer drug delivering systems that could offer an alternative to surgical organ removal. The Danish company Nordisk cut guidance for a second time in 6 weeks while announcing an 11% workforce reduction to save $1.3 billion annually. they've got a huge weighting to Denmark GDP, like an absolute phenomenal input to Danish GDP. So I want to keep an eye on there. Klarna. They've priced its IPO above the estimated range with strong demand, achieving a $15.1 billion valuation. This will be a key test for the fintech IPO market. And finally, for me, trading implications here are clear. AI infrastructure continues driving massive moves in tech stocks, while regulatory uncertainty around China, US-China trade creates both risks and opportunities across multiple sectors. That's according to those in the know. And that's it for me. Back to you in the studio.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan. In
Thank
terms of
you.
today, then, a bit of a light docket, to be completely honest with you. On the data front, the only real release of any note is going to be the latest US PPI figures, which we get at 1:30 this afternoon. Headline PPI, that is seen rising by 3.3% on an annual basis in August, which would be unchanged from the pace that we saw in the month of July. Of course, do recall, I'm only mentioning this because Ryan Littlestone's on the call. Good morning, Ryan. The prior
Morning.
month's print was propped up by a rise in portfolio management fees, which is likely to unwind this time out. The other thing to remember with PPI is we would usually see it as a leading indicator for CPI, which of course we get tomorrow. It's not quite as useful on that front right now. And the reason for that is because PPI explicitly excludes tariffs and duties from the data. So that is going to potentially skew things a little bit lower as well. Besides that, there's not really too much going on. No real notable earnings of note. We are due to hear from the SNB Schlegel at some point today. Although, of course, the Fed, ECB, BOE, and pretty much everyone else are in their pre-meeting blackout periods at this moment in time. And I guess the only other thing to note in terms of scheduled events is a 10-year note auction out of the United States at 6:00 this evening, with $39 billion worth being sold off. And of course, the usual reminder that trade and particularly geopolitical headlines with what's going on in the Middle East and in Poland set to remain in focus as we move through the day ahead. But very much, I think, market participants' minds already starting to turn towards the US CPI figures tomorrow, and of course the ECB decision tomorrow as well.
Exactly that. Well, Mr. Michael Brown, thank you so much as always. Listeners, thank you so much as always. I am on the blast later on with Cam. I can see Cam listening in for the crypto blast, and also later on with Angie for the grain market blast. But from me and Michael for today, that's it. Whatever you're doing, if you're in front of screens, keep it tight. If you're doing anything else, stay safe. And yeah, we'll see you all tomorrow.
If you're on strike, get to a picket.
Yeah, exactly. Stop listening to us and picket, you bastards. Right. See you later.